All right, one of the tools that we use throughout this entire course is factoring and solving quadratics. And so I'm going to go through some of the basics of factoring and then just talk a little bit about how we solve quadratics using factoring. So factoring is definitely something you should have done last year in Algebra 1. The first thing you should always look for is what we call a common factor. So for this first one right here, if I'm looking for a common factor, I believe I can pull out a 4x squared and a y. And what I'm left with is I'm left with 5x from the first term here, and I'm left with positive 3 for the second term. And that is factoring it completely. So if you look at this, I start with two terms, and this is one complete term here, because I'm just multiplying two things together. Next problem here, I can factor out an x plus y, and I'm left with 7, and then I have a minus z and a positive z, which cancels out, so I'm just left with 7 times x plus y. And the next one here, what I can factor out of these two terms is I can pull out a 9, I can pull out an x, and I can pull out a y. There's 4 of them I can pull out, and I'm left with 2x squared plus 1. Okay, the next type of problem is difference of two squares. Difference, of course, refers to the minus sign between them, and then these are two squared terms. So I basically take a look at this, and I can do plus and minus like this. This and this together are going to give me 25y to the fourth, so it's 5y squared and 5y squared. They're going to be the same. Multiply those together to get 25y to the fourth, and then this one and this one give me 16x squared, so it's going to be 4x and 4x here. 4x times 4x is 16x squared. Next problem down here is 1 minus 16x to the fourth. Let's factor these guys, so it's going to be 1 plus minus 4x squared, 4x squared. And then I have to ask myself, am I done factoring it? Have I factored it completely? I'm not, because this thing factors down to 1 minus 2x times 1 plus 2x. So now, if I just bring this over to here, 1 plus 4x squared, this is factored completely. The third type of problem is a perfect square trinomial. Basically, this is where when I factor this, for example, I'm going to end up with something squared, a binomial squared. And so in this case, it's going to be 3x minus y. Or in other words, you can always check your answer, right? If I did 3x minus y and 3x minus y, I can do the good old FOIL thing. Okay, and I can multiply that, and what you should get when you multiply it all out is what you started with. So there's really no reason when you're taking a factoring test or there's a factoring problem, there's no reason for you to not know if you got it right or wrong. You just need to multiply it back out and see if you get what you started with. This one, I can factor out an x. I'm left with x squared minus 16x plus 64. And then this part of it, of course, factors to x, let's see, x plus 8, minus 8, sorry, x minus 8 squared. And then the last one is basically just good old factoring a trinomial. Trinomial means it's got 3 terms. When I factor this, I'm basically looking here, I got x and x. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 14 and add to positive 5x. And of course here I'm going to get positive 7 and negative 2, multiplies to negative 14, and adds to positive 5x. Next one here is w squared, two numbers that multiply to 10 but add to negative 7. It's going to be minus 5 and minus 2. And that's factored completely, although next year you can talk about, doing something weird like w minus the square root of 2, w plus the square root of 2, but you don't have to do that for this year. And then this last one basically is factoring, and there's all these different methods when your coefficient in front of the first term here is not positive 1, it's just a number. I use guess and check. If you have some method that you learned last year, you can go ahead and use it, but basically I know that this has to be 3x and x to get 3x squared. I know that these two numbers here and here have to multiply to positive 2, and then I'm going to basically check this and this to see if they add up to this middle term here. And I know that if I plug in a 2 and a 1 here, it's got to be both have to be positive, and I check it, I get 2x here and I get 3x here. That gives me 5x, and I'm good. So that is factored completely. If you have some method that you learned last year, I know there's there's these box methods that I've seen with people, and I've seen the river method and Lizzie's method and everything. So whatever you learned last year, you're allowed to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump to the back. All right, here I am on the back side. Most of these problems are just problems that are similar to the ones on the front side, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip over those. But I do want to address the idea of solving a quadratic like this. So if I have something like this one here first, there's a couple ways I can do this. I can go ahead and bring everything over to the one side, set it equal to 0. So that's x squared minus 9 equals 0. And then I can factor it, x minus 3, x plus 3 equals 0, using the difference of two squares. And hopefully you can see here that what we have is a situation where we can apply zero product property. Product property. And what zero product property basically says is that, okay, if I have two things that are multiplied together on the left side here and they have to be equal to 0, either this one has to be equal to 0 or this one has to be equal to 0. It's the only way I'm going to get 0 when I multiply two things together. So I can do x minus 3 equals 0, or I can do x plus 3 equals 0, so I get positive 3 or negative 3 as my x values. Okay, and you don't need this step right here. I just wanted to show you where we're getting that from. The other way you can do it is something like this one here, where you bring everything over to the right side, and I go ahead and just square root both sides. So it's the square root of x squared equals the square root of 1/4, and I get the absolute value of x equals a half, or x is equal to plus or minus 1/2, like that. And then, there's other problems like this one down here where I can factor it. So I'm going to factor it using one of the methods. I'm going to do guess and check, like I said, on the front side, 5x and 5x. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 6, but these guys here and here and here and here add up to negative 7. And so I think it's going to end up being 2 and negative 2 and positive 3. Let's try that. So I get 3x here, I get 5x, negative 2, negative 10x, and that adds up to negative 7x, so I'm good. So now I can do zero product property, and I can do 5x plus 3 equals 0. Solve for x. X ends up being equal to negative 3/5, or x minus 2 equals 0, so x of course is equal to positive 2. And there's my two answers for x. I'm going to stop right here. By the way, there's a typo here. This should be squared here. But I'm going to stop right here and let you go ahead and try some of other problems from the homework. Alright, take care.